Starmer stood outside number 10, just as his predecessor did, but emerged looking slightly less like a drowned rat, despite the frequent showers. In among the usual plaudits, we had how hard-working the old PM was, blah, 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 usual promises to rebuild that we've heard probably too many times before in recent years. Starmer, nevertheless, he cut through on several occasions. I don't know what struck you most. For me, his decision to acknowledge the lack of trust in politicians today and the nightmare, if that's the right word, of the last 5 years that brought us from Partygate to Liz Truss's catastrophic budget on a tide of sort of culture war nonsense and what many see as out-and-out corruption.
This wound, this lack of trust, can only be healed by actions, not words. I know that. But we can make a start today with the simple acknowledgement that public service is a privilege and that your government should treat every single person in this country with respect. But whether you voted Labour or not, in fact, especially if you did not, I say to you directly, my government will serve you. Politics can be a force for good. We will show that. We've changed the Labour Party, returned it to service, and that is how we will govern. Country first, party second.
You know, I like the fact that Starmer wasn't as sort of bright-eyed and wide-eyed as Tony Blair was back in 97. I think he judged the mood just right. There wasn't much chat about policy, nor would you expect there to be. Next to nothing on public services, save his priorities were world-class schools and affordable homes. And interesting, and I think this was interesting, that comment on homes was enough to rally stocks in house-building companies. I think it was Barratt, Taylor Wimpey, Persimmon and Vistry all saw their shares rise by more than 2% on that alone. And indeed, the FTSE 250 index of domestically focused mid-cap stocks rose 0.6%. So the good times are back. Well, it's a bit early to call that. My favourite bit of the speech was this.
You have given us a clear mandate, and we will use it to deliver change, to restore service and respect to politics, end the era of noisy performance, tread more lightly on your lives, and unite our country. 4 nations standing together again, facing down, as we have so often in our past, the challenges of an insecure world.
The end of noisy performance politics, a light touch on people's lives. I love those comments. I thought they landed just right. An acknowledgement that many voters have been driven away from the democratic process. More than 40% of voters didn't show up for Thursday's vote. Ironically, at a time when politics has had a notably malign influence on our existence. We have less money to spend, less time alive in which to spend it. Fewer people voting. Now, that wasn't the first time that Starmer had used that line about politicians needing to tread more lightly in other people's lives. He used exactly the same line right at the start of this year when, the election must have been in his mind. After all the problems of the pandemic and culture war nonsense of late, I think it's a tantalising promise to make. But it didn't land well with everyone when he first made it back in January. The Financial Times, whose reporting of the last 5 years I think has always been worth reflecting on, argued back in January that Starmer was unlikely to deliver on that promise. One, because it's not in his gift or the Labour Party's. The question is whether our non-dom, billionaire-owned right-wing press will start getting all cuddly with Keir or Angela Rayner or Rachel Reeves, our first female Chancellor. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. As the FT's Robert Shrimsley put it at the time, you don't join the party to tread lightly on people's lives. You join to put your finger on the scales of society. The one thing we can be sure a Labour government will not do is step softly. While he hopes Starmer to replace the rage with calmer governance, in the same speech he added that his gentler politics is also more demanding as people are asked to compromise for national unity. The politics Starmer seeks, Shrimsley goes on, is no less intrusive then. The country is simply being asked to be a good sport about it. Is that what's happening? Are we being asked to play along because it's in everybody's best interest to do so? And if we are, begs the question, will you? Will you play along? Will you play along for a bit in the national interest? Is it unpatriotic to do anything else? Is this the honeymoon period we're alluding to? or something different? Tim Ross is Deputy Head of News for Politico EU. Joins me first. Good morning to you, Tim.
Morning, hello.
Hello. Do you see this as being a different era in politics? Can he deliver on that, or is it just the honeymoon we're talking about?
Well, he's got a stonking majority, so he has every chance of being able to change things up. Of course, it's not totally in his control. I think what he's done right is read the mood of the country when it comes to a desire for a quieter kind of politics. And I think we've got a piece coming out actually this weekend on the politics of boring. And it's a strange thing, but boring right now can be a pretty attractive thing for voters, I think. And that's something
after the chaos of the last 5 years.
Chaos. He's picked up on that. Interestingly, it worked also to an extent for Joe Biden in the US 4 years ago, when he was following 4 years of chaos under Donald Trump. There was a sort of unspoken theme over in the US to make the White House boring again after the Trump era. And I think you can see sort of the same sort of thing happening for the House of Commons, really, potentially under Starmer's new plan. I think the question really is whether actually it's going to wash with the public, and if it does, for how long? Because the reality for politicians now is they have to operate in an environment which is very impatient. Boring might bore people, and I think that's probably his greatest danger in the years ahead.
A number of people were asking me on social media what I thought about our press, about how they are going to respond to this election, because Murdoch hasn't done the usual thing with his stable of aligning with the winner. You know, he's been quite critical down the line. Today, less critical than perhaps the Daily Mail and the Telegraph, which are still in full culture war mode, which would suggest a gentler politics isn't coming anytime soon to me, if that's how the public continues to get their information. But then circulations are down, as Kelvin Mackenzie told us last week.
The press is always going to be noisy. I mean, I think that you're right, and the people you've been talking to, I think, are absolutely bang on. The press is always going to be noisy. I've worked for a long time in newspapers and the media. You've got to get headlines. You've got to sell your stories to a public, readership, which is swamped really with options of things to do with their time. And that smartphone short attention span is a big factor now, I think, in all debate. And it certainly has been responsible in what we've seen, I think, in driving some of the populist right across Europe, the surge in support for people like Jordan Bardella in France, who's running the National Rally campaign. The Marine Le Pen party at the moment is doing incredibly well in those French elections, which are coming up tomorrow, don't forget. And he's a big star on TikTok. Nigel Farage has also found himself an amazing TikTok audience, so we're told. So it's actually an extremely difficult media environment in which to get away with being boring for very long.
I completely concur. So I'm tempted to ask, if you can stare into your crystal ball briefly, how long a honeymoon period or period of grace do you expect Starmer to get from the Fourth Estate, from the press, but also from the public generally? My gut feeling is he's not going to get very long at all.
It may not be as long as it could, as perhaps he wants. And I think there's, don't forget the great risk of events, coming along to derail the governments. I mean, there is nothing populist and entertaining, if you want to see them that way, as Donald Trump and Boris Johnson were when they were in charge of the US and the UK. There's nothing they could have done to stop the pandemic. They couldn't, derailing their agendas for government, right? And the same thing with Ukraine and various other things that you just cannot control if you're a leader. And Starmer will have to contend with some of those things, and then he will have to be up to it, and up to it publicly. And I think that's the issue. You can't totally disappear. You have to be present, and you have to be convincing in your presentation as a leader. So it's a difficult one, but I think there's goodwill for now. So he'll be doing his best to make the most of that.
Harry's hanging on the line in Norwich. Good morning to you, Harry. A first-time caller as well. Welcome.
Yeah. Good morning, Matthew.
Morning.
Look, I think Starmer really needs to get a grip of immigration, and this is not me saying this because I'm from the right wing and their camp, but I just genuinely think that in order to curb the rise in populism, within this country, I mean, look, I'm scared of the reform votes in this country. I'm quite frankly scared. Although you could say, like, look, it was the same as UKIP a couple of years ago. I think honestly, this is like a tide that is not going to be.
Could we redefine, rephrase the debate on immigration, and instead of going down the route of the far right, all immigrants are evil and want to eat your children, why don't we do it? You know, we've got schools closing for lack of pupils. We've got a declining birth rate. None of our services work properly. We've got over 100,000 jobs going in the NHS, 120,000 jobs going in care. We need migrants. Isn't that the whole point, that we've got to change the dialogue from hate and fear, which we've had for 14 years, to something a little bit more pragmatic?
Yes, this is like absolutely true. So I firmly believe that we need to like adopt a more Australian style system to immigration. I think the Australians do a points voting, a points based system. So it's like you put your occupation, etc., etc. What can you offer us, and then we decide.
But you're still thinking that immigration is the issue. I would suggest that immigration is an issue that has been created by the far right, and it has been used to obscure and divert our attention away from the failings of the last government over 14 years to fix our health service, fix our schools, fix our roads, fix our railways, fix our military, fix anything. They haven't done any of it. All they do is look at these migrants. Look at these migrants. That's what's got to change. We've got to embrace the problems we've got in this country and deal with them, rather than keep diverting people and distracting people away from them. I mean, you're calling in Norwich. I know Norwich really well. Do you feel you're overrun by migrants in Norwich?
No,
you don't. Right, it's just a nonsense.
Yeah.
Lee Anderson's talking about parts of London being a no-go area. I mean, it's just not true. It's just lies.
I think you are. Yeah, I think at its core, you are right that immigration is something that is. You look, immigrants add to our workforce, they add to our labour force. Okay, 100%. This is true. However, I also acknowledge that whilst immigration has been used as a talking point by the far right, we should not be scared of looking at ways in which we can benefit our country's economy by dealing with immigration with a more successful reforms plan in place. I honestly think, like, if we can, we are woefully undervaluing teachers in our country.
Mm-hmm.
If we can increase immigration of teachers, of even builders. Okay, if we reformed the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act and the Town and County Planning Act, and increased the amount of builders and teachers coming into our country, we could really be setting ourselves and priming our economy to be something really amazing.
I do find it fascinating that a man calling from Norwich, which has minor immigration, has listed migration as a sort of and their number one concern, even with this new government, because I think that tells us how the issue has been exaggerated and used to create a climate of fear. And I think it's really interesting, Harry, that you're looking at pragmatic solutions, which is fantastic, but the fear has still got you.
The swing to the left and Starmer is only a temporary holding pattern.
Well, that happens in every election, isn't it? They're all temporary.
It serves its purpose to get rid of the Tory chaos and corruption. But the thing is that it's perfect for the right wing because it's going to swing to the. Farage is waiting in the wings. He's established with a number of MPs with a large vote. They're a credible party to vote for, so they're going to have a massive rise in this country.
Okay, so the Lib Dems, right, have been treated as a Mickey Mouse joke for my entire life, even when they were in coalition, and yet they got way more seats than Reform on fewer votes, and yet people still don't take them seriously. So why are people going to take Reform seriously?
Yeah, but they've got a good number of MPs. They've got a large vote. They're now much more credible, so they're going to be more credible to vote for. And the Labour Party is doomed to fail in its idealistic policies. So it's going to.
What idealistic policies are doomed to fail? Let's be specific. Which ones?
Well,
I don't know. I'm asking you.
They're going to sort out the NHS, and they're going to just start chucking money at the doctors strike and all this sort of thing.
Well, as opposed to cutting
money,
as opposed to cutting money from doctors, which is what has happened in real terms. So you're not going to fix the NHS by cutting doctors' pay for 15 years. We've just had that. So why is giving doctors money a bad thing when we know taking money away from doctors doesn't work? Surely that is the logical way to go, isn't it? If it doesn't work cutting their pay, maybe we need to increase it.
Yeah, but
so that policy you don't think will work?
They're not going to be spending money.
But the Tories spent loads of money, David. You just didn't.
The They're doomed to fail. It's going to go to Farage.
But which policies?
As it should do, like Europe.
But all you're doing is talking. You're talking.
Under control.
Oh dear.
Under control.
So you're not going to tell me any policies. You're just going to talk in vagaries. Labour's doomed to fail, but Farage is going to work.
What policy you want to talk about? NHS
well, you're the one that say that you've done the NHS.
They haven't got any housing. How are they going to sort out housing?
Well, they're going to build 1.5 million houses.
Sort out planning.
Right.
They have so much resistance, they won't know what to do.
Okay, but
it's not going to happen.
Okay, but if it was Nigel Farage, it would happen.
You have to get back to basics. Look.
So just so I'm clear, David. Nothing Labour is going to do is going to work. Nothing they promise is going to work. But if Nigel Farage was in, we'd go back to basics and it would work.
Look, so many years this country been. Some Labour MPs were voted out by extremist Muslims.
Yeah, well, they weren't voted out by extremist Muslims. They're voted out by the electorate. They were voted out by the electorate.
Yeah, but they're extremists bringing in. Issues
and you don't think Nigel Farage is an extremist?
This has got nothing to do with this country.
But you don't think Nigel Farage is an extremist?
No, he's not. He's trying to deal with the migration chaos.
Yeah, which isn't really, much of a problem. It's only been invented by the Tories as a problem, isn't it? Allowing record numbers of people in, not building any processing centres, that kind of thing, failing.
We don't need to import labour. We need to.
Well, I think you'll find a lot of people might.
The birth rate in this country. We need to support families.
Right, so we've got to increase the birth rate. And how long is it going to take before we get a new workforce based on your plan? 18 years, isn't it? Minimum.
Look,
18
we don't
years.
Want to import the chaos into this country.
Of course, David. Gosh, you can see why Labour won a landslide. Lovely talking to you. Thank you.
I don't think he's particularly uncharismatic. I think what it is, his politics are uncharismatic. You were reading out the German papers and the European papers saying that Britain has turned left.
Yeah.
I don't think under any circumstance Labour under Starmer is left-wing at all. I think it's very much on the right. And basically all he's done, you can only see by his speech outside Downing Street, he was referring to his notes all the time. He's got no confidence in his own politics. And that's, I think, what determines his lack of charisma. He's spent, ever since he's become Labour leader, he's scourged the Labour Party on the left. Yeah. So it's not on the left. And I think one of the most significant results yesterday in the general election was Jeremy Corbyn's victory at Islington as an independent. I think that says a hell of a lot about. Well, I think Corbyn will be there to haunt Starmer throughout the next few years.
What about the media, the press? Because how do you think the honeymoon period the voters will give Labour will be dictated to by the press, and that as soon as the press goes full anti-Labour, the public will follow in and suit?
Well, I think the honeymoon period is going to be very, very short.
Me too.
I don't think it's a matter of 6 months. I
Me
think
too.
Well over the doctor's thing. He's got the economy and everything. Yeah. He's just inherited. He's just really a government, really, is going to have to deal with the very same problems as what the Tories have had. And I don't think they've got any real answers.